We've had a couple of really nice conversations in the virtual rooms. So it's nice for us to also have a virtual conversation. I am, as April was saying, I'm Rachelle, and I run a divested workforce. We work quite closely with Jenny on Flink. One of the things I think that we really wanted to bring up today is about the realities of what it means to be facilitating remote working for many people, and actually maybe just not be too rose-tinted glasses about it, if you like. One of the things I'm personally quite obsessed with is helping people understand, people in my teams, understand that they don't necessarily need to take their previous workplace formalities into a remote working environment, and sometimes they don't always work. For example, you don't need to ask for permission, but you do need to be quite clear in what it is that you want and what you're trying to achieve. You might, for example, decide that as part of your remote working, the reason why you're facilitating it is for a flexible working need. So you don't need to tell me or the clients that, you have a dentist appointment, for example. You're just unavailable. And I think some of this kind of mentality is really a shift where people can stop feeling like they need to ask and actually really take control of their working structure and their working environment, because they are really the only people that they are kind of reporting to on a minute by minute scale, at the very least, in a remote working situation. I know for Jenny it's a little bit different, because she has a massive team that she manages and she had one remote worker inside it, and she also has done remote working herself. Jenny, we were talking earlier about how you have first-hand knowledge of maybe some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, so I lead a team of 22, and I have one remote worker, and I have to be honest with you, I did fail her as a people manager in terms of what she needed and recognizing what she would need and also asking the questions. It wasn't until that I did some remote working for personal reasons. I needed to lead the team 100% remotely for 12 months while I was getting over some personal brutal experiences, and realize what I needed. You are suddenly, with this higher autonomy, take on a huge operational workload in terms of self-discipline, in terms of structure, and the isolation is a thing. And the sort of information isolation as well, the sort of like information that you would normally get in an office environment with sort of like conversations taking place organically around you. So I had to completely change the structure of how I was going to lead the team from home. And learnt a lot from that. It was a bit of a baptism by fire, but certainly learnt a lot and realised what I needed to do right by the remote worker that we have, who's based in Ireland, in terms of making sure that they are not getting burnt out from doing overwork, to prove the success of remote working. Certainly in big corporations, it's a real onus on tangible results, and there tends to be a bit of overcompensation for that. Knowing when to stop, knowing when to unplug, and also making those proper breaks where you actually walk around, investing in a proper home environment, but also network in terms of what's that community that you can create that's around you and close to hand. So you do sort of like break that bit of isolation. So yes, it's been a huge learning curve, but incredibly helpful and productive. And it was the key thing that meant that I didn't need to get signed off and leave my job, and I could still lead the team and do what I needed to do personally.
Yeah, I think lots of what you're saying is it feels sensible and it feels really practical. I think a lot of people kind of get to a point where they've agreed remote working and they're quite excited about it. I know earlier when Brittany was speaking, she was saying that it's incredibly important for the people who are managing to have had that experience. And I can see by what you've been telling me that it was the most beneficial thing for you, is to actually have yourself in those shoes to be able to reflect on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, to start off with, I did everything possibly that you could do wrong. I was like bothing myself from the kitchen table. I was never taking any breaks. I was getting stuff done, and I wasn't being disciplined about the different touch points that you need. So yeah, completely changed the structure of it. But then also that helped prepare me for the difference of how I need to work now. So I obviously have this contrast between working and leading a team at HSBC, and then I'm also, coordinating with a distributed group of people. Storm Collective are one of them, to manage Flink. And so you realise that the isolation piece is a really big thing, because you're doing a lot of long hours remotely on your own, and realising and taking that learning experience back to HSBC. There's a huge amount that people managers need to learn. That they need to be trained and educated. It is a thing. You need to know how to manage and lead remote and flexible workers.
Yeah, and I think there was an interesting thing that we were talking about earlier together, about the right kind of tools and the temptation of businesses to invest in things that they think will plug into their system best, rather than invest in the needs of someone who's remote working. So I know, for example, that some of the things that you're talking about are physical tools and really important, like a decent chair and not a kitchen table. But other things, like the digital things, sometimes people can get lost. It is harder to have a conversation, sorry for saying this in this format, but in remote environments sometimes, especially if you've got really tricky things that you're trying to work through as business. So understanding that there might be a need of your remote worker to be facilitated in a different way. Are they allowed to write down all their feedback and send it in because they're not convinced that they're really being brought into this, maybe as much as people in the room, for example, if it's that kind of fast-paced talking environment where you might get talked over or cut off. And I think also just thinking about things like facilitating tools that make it feel like you can have a spontaneous conversation. Lots of businesses cut back on things like direct messaging, because they said that they were decreasing people talking directly to each other. I think that's a really good sign that that's probably going to work for remote working. And I think thinking about those tools in the mindset of not what is good for our business specifically, but what is good for our remote worker is probably the best place to be. In my experience, because we have 2 full-time staff that come into the office 4 and 5 days a week, and then everybody else is remote working. There's about 30 people who remote work with us. In my experience, it's really important to understand personality and fluidity. So you set up what you think will work with a person, and then you help them go on this journey. There's no point in being rigid about something because that's how you said it was going to be. And I found that, especially with creatives, it's a really different environment. Some people really need their creative time to be their best creative time to be at a certain time, and that's why they don't want a 9-to-5 job anymore. And I think your focus and your type and your way of working, if that's respected, then you will actually get the best out of a remote worker, personally.
No, absolutely. And I think, it's okay to be unapologetic about what it is you need, how many touch points you need with the team and the line manager, and what you need to make it work. Absolutely. And when I've started to talk about it at HSBC a lot more now, is that from a people manager perspective, if this is going to scale and become the norm, then there has to be a different way of leading in terms of how you do that. Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that we were talking about is being clear with members of your team as to how to work with someone who's remote working as well. So I've thought about it from the position of manager, and we've thought about it from the position of remote worker, but are the people that are working with these people, are they also remote? And therefore, do they understand the situation, or are they completely not remote? Is this something that people feel is open to them all? Or do they feel like it's favoritism in some way? Is there, there's quite complicated relationships that come into your company culture when you're offering remote working in part rather than full.
Yeah, I mean, we particularly in the communications function, we have a very flexible working culture, and certainly in my team it is 100% flexible. And by that it means is you manage your own time. If you need to work from home for a week, you work from home. If you need to come in at 10 and miss the commute because you want to reduce that stress, that's absolutely fine. It's about outputs, not how long you're sitting in the chair. So the culture and the dynamic is very different anyway. And we use whatever technical tool we can get our hands on to help that. And to facilitate that as well. So we make the most of that, and we change that culture. And, as we say, using the tech tools, we don't have Slack, but we have WhatsApp, and making sure those conversations, there's a balance between what's talked about organically in the team, physically in the office, but also what takes place on those channels, so that our remote worker who's in Ireland feels part of it and can organically hear what we're talking about. That she might not necessarily be, she'd benefit from that from a meeting, but can see and hear what we're talking about organically.
And I think what you're saying is really important, because there are some big businesses that don't lean into this position of trust and autonomy. And those, I think, are the more dangerous environments. I know, for example, that I've had friends who don't work remotely but have satellite offices, and they've had complications between the offices of people not thinking the company culture was fair, or they didn't feel as listened to as the main office, if you like. I've also had instances of friends who are in fairly traditional working environments saying that their boss wanted them to turn the camera on at work to make sure people were dressed in an appropriate way when they were in the office. And that kind of extremism is silly, and we can laugh at it. But as well, I think it does get to the heart of it with some businesses. It is a trust issue. Do you have advice for people in these kind of more formal environments?
With the trust issue, I mean, I've heard that. I mean, I've experienced from lots of different companies the trust issue. And if you don't trust your staff, you're hiring the wrong people. It should be a default position of trust from the very beginning, in my view. And that anybody, no matter how long your tenure has been, or for whatever reason, there shouldn't be a reason. We're adults. We should be able to trust it to manage our time in a way that works for us, so that we can, manage the hot mess of life outside of work. But I do think in corporate life, though, there's still this very much sense that your professional self needs to be completely disconnected from your personal life. That is starting to change. I mean, you see that culture changing, but in big corporates, it's happening slowly, but it is happening.
Yeah, I guess we can wrap up with a bit of a question that everybody else can answer, maybe you as well. Today I saw there was an announcement saying that Starcom's, and I don't think this was supposed to be leaked, but anyway, a memo to Starcom staff saying the Friday feeling of the office culture had gone because there was such high absenteeism in the office on Fridays. However, this has come about because they have a completely flexible working and remote working structure in the office. I personally found it kind of hilarious, because to me it felt like a sign that it was working, because if lots of people feel that they need to work remotely on a Friday, and then other people went, oh, so Friday's a good day for us all to work remotely, I actually saw it as a win. But I wondered if maybe somewhere like HSBC, if that started to happen, would that be a challenge, do you think?
Would it be? I don't think so, because we have the tech to be able to plug in, and there's more of a balance. So because working from home is absolutely fine. I mean, we hot desk, we alternate in terms of when we work from home. There's a balance throughout the week. Friday is starting to look more popular, but it's not an issue in terms of productivity at all.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think that sounds pretty sensible. I think we'll probably see more and more of these things that feel like strange reactions coming out from big businesses as they trial this stuff and they roll it out. But I was thinking maybe we could leave a question to the audience, people in London and at home, thinking about what do you think would be signs of positive acceptance of remote working on a mass scale? Don't know if you have thoughts on that, or if you want me to not ask you that. You can answer it in the room. You can answer it at one of the tables if you like.
Yeah, I've just been given a hint to wind up, so maybe we can take it to the tables.
Well, I always love talking to you, Jenny, and I love working with you. I'll be happy to chat to everybody else online, as will you, I'm sure.
You too. Bye.
Bye.